Hello everyone, and thanks for watching. This video is meant to be an introduction to a proposed pre-lab activity for Chem 100 at California State University, Chico. Here we have a pre-lab learning module in our learning management system, Blackboard. This is the instructor view. Here's our welcome page. We are telling the students very clearly that this will take 35 to 45 minutes. Now, this lab section is worth 0.7 academic units, so that means we can give them 2.1 hours worth of work. The lab period is an hour and 15 minutes, or excuse me, an hour and 50 minutes. And so that gives us 16 minutes outside of class that we're allowed to give them. Now, this is not only meant to be a pre-lab activity for them, but it is also meant to replace 20 to 30 minutes of in-class time that we would normally spend doing equipment demonstrations, calculations, and such like that. So that's how we justify it taking 35 to 45 minutes. So we're going to go over some real-life context for the experiments. We'll have the chemistry background. We will have titration theory. Titration is the procedure that they'll be doing in this lab. We'll have some video equipment demonstrations and a review of how to use a graph, a standard curve, to determine an unknown. And finally, we'll end with a quiz. So our learning objectives are to understand the importance of measuring concentrations of metals in water. One thing that the students just recently learned in lecture is about the Flint water crisis. So they've already got some context for this lab. Next, we want them to understand how a titration procedure works, what exactly we're measuring, and what we get out of that. We'd like them to be able to use a standard curve to determine the concentration of an unknown. They have done this before in a previous lab, so this should be review for them. And finally, we'd like them to be able to correctly use the glassware and understand each piece's purpose. I've given them a list of study items to address that will be included in the quiz. The quiz will have questions that are almost identical to these study questions, just in multiple choice format. So here for the first part, we have our context. I've curated a video about water spots. It goes over hard and soft water, how calcium exists in the environment and how it gets into the water, and different types of water calcium buildup that you can get in your sinks and tubs. Here we have a video of a PowerPoint presentation that I created going over titration theory. It's a short presentation. I won't go over the whole thing, but I'll just show you the most fun slide. So we're going to add one little EDCI ion at a time until all of the calcium ions have been paired up. At that point, our solution will turn blue. Pardon me for a moment, had a little trouble getting out of there. So next we have the chemical background. This is a couple pages from their lab manual. They have this in print already, but this is an accessible document that's friendly to screen readers. So let's look at that for just a moment. So it gives here the chemical background, a little bit of information on on the different chemicals that we're using and a little bit of fun facts about what they can be used for. We have instructions on how to perform the titration. And then we have a report sheet. Students will be working in pairs, so they have a namespace for each person, data tables for them to put their measurements in, put their calculated values in, and determine the final concentration of their unknown sample. So here's the first part of the equipment introduction. I have another curated video of someone doing an acid-base titration, which is a little different from what we're doing in this lab, but the procedure is exactly the same. And in part 2 of the equipment introduction, I have a video that I created where we are drawing the titration setup and labeling that. So let's just watch a few seconds of that.
Hello, Chem 100. Welcome back. Today, control the flow. And it's got lines on it. In real life, it has a lot more lines, and this titrant is going to be our EDTA.
Okay, you get the picture from that. So finally here we have some review of how to use a standard curve. Now in the previous lab, lab 8, they used a standard curve to determine the concentration of an unknown. They were just using a different laboratory technique. We're doing the same thing in this lab. The procedure is exactly the same, so this should be review. And finally, what I have is a quiz. And so this is just a regurgitation of all the study items that I gave the students at the very beginning. This is not supposed to be a high-stakes summative assessment. It's just supposed to be more like a self-check to make sure that they understood everything. But of course it's worth points, so they actually want to do it. Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this introduction to the pre-lab learning module for Chem 100, and hope to see you next time.